My sister tried to ruin my wedding, so I exposed her secret affair in front of everyone. You know that saying, some people just can't stand to see others happy? Well, my sister took that to a whole new level. She didn't just try to ruin my wedding day, she tried to tear apart my entire life. But what she didn't expect was for me to fight back. It all started when I found out about her secret affair. And trust me, when I exposed it in front of everyone, it was a moment no one would ever forget. Part 1. The unexpected discovery that changed everything. I've always been pretty close with my sister, or at least I thought I was. Growing up, we were inseparable. Sure, we had our fair share of sibling squabbles. Who doesn't? But I always believed that when it really mattered, she'd have my back, like I had hers. Fast forward to my engagement. I was over the moon when my fiancé proposed, and planning the wedding became my entire focus. I wanted everything to be perfect. The venue, the dress, the guest list. I wanted it all to come together seamlessly. And of course, my sister was going to be my maid of honor. I figured, who else would I trust to stand by me on the biggest day of my life? But little did I know, my sister was harboring some deep, dark secrets, and they would come to light in the most unexpected way. I started noticing small, strange things. She'd act distant when we talked about the wedding, never seemed as excited as she should have been, and there were these weird gaps in her schedule when she'd suddenly disappear for a few hours. I thought maybe she was just stressed out. Planning a wedding can be overwhelming, right? But something in my gut told me it was more than that. Then, about a month before the wedding, I found the first clue. It was just a random thing at first, something that didn't really add up. I was at her place, picking up a dress fitting she had for me, and I saw her phone on the counter. It was face down, which is weird for her because she's one of those people who never puts her phone down. For some reason, I picked it up, almost like I was being drawn to it. And there it was. A message from a guy I'd never heard of before. The text was simple. "I can't wait to see you tonight. Don't let your husband find out." I stood there, staring at it for what felt like forever. The blood drained from my face. My sister, was having an affair. And not just any affair, but one she was clearly trying to keep a secret from everyone, including me. I couldn't believe it. How could she do this? How could she betray not just me, but her own family like this? I put the phone down, my heart racing, trying to process what I'd just read. But I knew one thing for sure. I had to get to the bottom of it. Part 2. Confronting my sister. The first shocking truth. I couldn't just let it slide. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep this could go. If my sister was hiding something like this from me, what else was she keeping from our family? And how long had this been going on? So, I did what anyone would do in a situation like this. I started digging. I didn't want to confront her right away. I needed more information, more proof. I couldn't risk making accusations without knowing the full story, so I started paying closer attention to her behavior, trying to find out more about this guy and what kind of affair she was really involved in. It wasn't hard to put two and two together once I started snooping around. I noticed that she was always texting or on the phone late at night, and she started canceling plans with me or the rest of the family for work or personal reasons. There were also random little lies she told, like saying she was at a friend's house when I knew she was somewhere else entirely. But the real kicker came when I found out who the guy was. I'd managed to get a glimpse of his name from one of her messages. David, I think it was. I didn't recognize it, but I wasn't about to let that stop me. I did some quick online searching and found his social media profile. Turns out, he wasn't just some random dude. He was married. And not just married, but to someone who I actually knew. A woman who used to be a close family friend. My mind was spinning at this point. My sister having an affair with a married man, who was also tangled up in our social circle. It was way worse than I ever imagined. I couldn't even wrap my head around it. And here I was, planning the happiest day of my life, and my own sister was living this double life. I was furious, confused, and honestly, a little heartbroken. But what really pissed me off was the timing. She was acting like everything was normal. She was helping me with the wedding planning, pretending to be excited for me, all while she was sneaking around behind my back, making a mess of things. I had to confront her. There was no way around it. But I couldn't just pull her aside quietly and have a chat. No, I needed to make sure she understood what she was doing to me, to our family. And I needed the truth to come out, not just for me, but for everyone who was being affected by this. Part 3. The Secret Affair. Then exposed, the chaos unfolds. I decided to confront my sister, but not in the way you'd expect. I wasn't going to take her aside and have a calm, rational conversation about what I'd found. No, I wanted to expose her, shatter her perfect little facade in front of everyone. It was time for her to face the consequences of her actions, and if I had to drag the truth into the spotlight to do it, then so be it. I kept everything to myself for a few more days, watching her like a hawk. She had no idea that I knew about her affair, and I wasn't going to let her suspect anything. I played it cool, went along with the wedding planning, even let her act like everything was fine. But deep down, I was seething. I wanted to get this over with, but I also needed to make sure the moment was right. The perfect opportunity presented itself during the wedding rehearsal, just a few days before the big day. The entire bridal party was there, including my sister and my fiancé's family. We were all standing in the church, going through the motions, and everything seemed like it was falling into place. People were laughing, chatting, and my sister was once again acting like the proud maid of honor, helping me with my dress, touching up my makeup, even telling me how amazing I looked. But inside, I was ready to snap. I'd invited a few people who weren't exactly close to my sister, but I knew they had a bit of a history with her, people who could add weight to what I was about to do. They didn't know the full story, but I needed them there. I needed witnesses. I had one goal in mind: to make sure the truth about her affair came out at the wedding. If it meant making her uncomfortable or ruining her image in front of everyone, then so be it. It was time for her to feel the heat. I waited for the moment when everyone was gathered in the main hall, chatting about random stuff before the rehearsal dinner. That's when I saw him, David. The guy my sister had been sneaking around with. He was sitting at the back, pretending to be just another guest. I wasn't even sure if anyone else noticed him. He was keeping a low profile. But I did. And I wasn't about to let him get away with this either. I signaled to one of my friends who was standing near the front of the room, and we exchanged a knowing glance. It was time. Part 4. The family's reaction. Tears, accusations, and silence. As the room filled with chatter and laughter, I could feel my heart racing. The air was thick with anticipation. Everyone was excited about the upcoming wedding, and here I was, preparing to shatter that excitement with the truth. I won't lie, part of me felt a bit of guilt. I was about to do something that would absolutely destroy my sister's reputation in front of everyone, but she'd left me no choice. The anger had been building up for weeks, and I was done playing nice. My friend Sarah, who had been in on the plan, gave me the nod. I could feel the adrenaline kicking in. I walked over to the microphone, the one that was set up for the speeches later in the evening. All eyes were on me, and the room fell quiet. My sister was standing a few feet away, adjusting her dress and looking at me like everything was perfectly fine. She had no idea what was coming. "Hey everyone," I started, my voice surprisingly steady. "I know we're all excited about the big day, but I think we need to talk about something first." There was a bit of confusion in the room, some raised eyebrows. My sister turned to look at me, a little frown tugging at her lips. She could sense something was off, but she still had no idea what was coming. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I don't want to keep anything hidden anymore, especially not from all of you who are here to support me. I've found something out that's really been bothering me, something that I think you all should know. My sister's face went pale. She started moving toward me, but I could see the panic in her eyes. It was too late for her to stop me now. "You see," I continued, "my sister has been hiding something from all of us, and I think it's time you all knew the truth." I paused for a moment, letting the tension build. The room was completely silent. It was almost too perfect. The moment had arrived, and I wasn't backing down. "I found out that my sister," I said, turning to look directly at her, "has been having an affair with a married man, someone who's sitting right here in this room." Everyone was frozen. I could feel the shock and disbelief rippling through the crowd, and I caught a glimpse of my sister's face. She was turning red, her eyes wide with fear and anger. She opened her mouth, as if to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. I wasn't done, though. "The man she's been seeing," I said, "is David. The same David who's sitting back there, acting like he doesn't have a care in the world. The same David who's married to someone we know, someone who's been our family friend for years." I pointed toward the back of the room, and there he was. David, looking uncomfortable but trying to remain calm. The gasps and whispers filled the room as people began to put the pieces together. It was like a domino effect. Everyone was slowly realizing the gravity of the situation. But the best part? My sister was standing there, helpless. She tried to step forward, but I held my ground. I couldn't let this go on any longer. Not when you were pretending to be the perfect sister while destroying everything around you. Part 5. My sister's apology. Too little, too late. The room erupted into chaos. People were gasping, whispering, and some even looking at each other like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. My sister, looking like she was about to implode, finally found her voice. You don't know what you're talking about," she shouted, her face flushed with rage. "This is none of your business. You have no right to do this." But it was too late. The truth had already spilled out, and there was no taking it back. The fact that David was sitting there, completely exposed, made it even worse. He was trying to act calm, but I could see the nervousness in his eyes. He knew the walls were closing in on him. The entire room had turned their attention to him, and I could see the guilt written all over his face. "I'm sorry," I said, forcing myself to keep my cool, even though everything inside me wanted to scream. "But I think the people who deserve to know the truth have a right to hear it. This isn't just about me. This affects everyone who's been lied to." My sister took a step back, looking around as if she were searching for an escape route. But there was no running now. People in the room were starting to exchange shocked glances, muttering things like, "I can't believe this," and "I had no idea." My mom, who had been standing nearby, finally spoke up. What is this about?" she asked, her voice shaking. I turned to my mom, not breaking eye contact with my sister. "Mom, I know you've been close with David's wife for years. She deserves to know, don't you think?" At that, my mom's face fell. It was like a light bulb went off in her head. She had no idea about my sister's affair, but the shock on her face told me everything I needed to know. David's wife was a good person. She didn't deserve this. Nobody did. But now the damage was done, and I wasn't going to sit by while my sister's actions tore everything apart. For a brief moment, my sister stood there, speechless. Then, as if realizing her time for defense had passed, she looked directly at me, her expression full of venom. "You think this is going to make you feel better? Ruining everything? You're pathetic!" I stood my ground. "I don't need to feel better. I need you to face the consequences of your actions." She tried to storm off, but I wasn't done yet. I had one more card to play. "And don't think you're getting away with this," I called after her. "I'll make sure everyone knows what you've been doing." At that moment, my sister broke down, collapsing into a chair. The anger had drained from her, replaced with something else. Shame, maybe regret. But whatever it was, it didn't matter to me anymore. I wasn't going to protect her, not after everything she'd done. The room was silent now, almost too quiet. Everyone was still processing what had just happened. It was like someone had pulled the plug on the party, and all the energy had drained away. David, still sitting in the back, looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. His wife wasn't at the rehearsal, but I knew the moment she found out, things were going to get even worse for him. The fallout from this would be massive, and I wasn't the least bit sorry about it. Part 6. The Fallout. A day of heartbreak and realization. The aftermath was brutal. I could feel the weight of every single eye in the room on me as people whispered among themselves. Some were clearly on my side, others were more sympathetic toward my sister. But I didn't care. She had crossed the line, and I was done being the nice, understanding sister who kept everything quiet for the sake of family. What she did wasn't just a betrayal to me, it was a betrayal to our whole family. My sister tried to leave the room, but my mom stopped her. "Where do you think you're going?" she demanded, her voice shaking but firm. "You owe everyone here an explanation." My sister looked torn. I could see her wavering between fighting back or finally owning up to the mess she'd created. But the tears started flowing, and she finally slumped into a chair, defeated. I turned to David, who was still sitting quietly at the back, trying his best to avoid the situation. "David," I called out, "you've been awfully quiet. I think it's time you spoke up." He didn't move at first, but after a long, painful pause, he stood up. I don't know what to say," he mumbled. He looked at my sister, then at the ground, clearly uncomfortable. I'm married, he said quietly. And this was a mistake. A huge mistake. You think? I shot back, my anger flaring up again. You know who else is married? Your wife, who's probably at home, completely unaware of the mess you've made. You've destroyed everything, and for what? A fling? David's face turned red, but he didn't say anything else. He seemed to know that any defense he offered would just sound like weak excuses. The damage was done. My sister had dragged him into this, and now they both had to face the consequences. The room was still tense, but my sister was the one who finally broke the silence. I'm sorry, she said through sobs. I didn't mean for this to happen. I was confused, okay? I didn't know what I wanted. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. Yeah, you did, I snapped. But don't act like you're the only one who's been hurt. You've ruined my trust, our family's trust. And for what? Some guy who was never worth it? The anger bubbled up in me again, but this time, I let it out in a sharp breath instead of another harsh word. I trusted you, you know? I thought you were my sister, my best friend, but this is just betrayal. And it's not just about me. Think about the people you've hurt, the people who trusted you, who loved you. She was still crying, her face buried in her hands now. My heart felt like it was being squeezed, but I knew I had to stay firm. She had to learn that actions had consequences. The rest of the night was a blur. We didn't finish the rehearsal dinner, and no one really spoke after that confrontation. Everyone filed out in their own time, some looking at me with sympathy, some still in shock, but most just wanting to get out of the uncomfortable situation. My sister stayed behind, not saying a word as my mom and I cleaned up. Later that night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had gone down. Part of me still felt conflicted. Was it really the right call to expose her like that? But then I remembered everything she'd done to me, to our family, and I knew deep down that I had made the right decision. She wasn't just betraying her marriage. Her affair had stolen something from me too. Something that couldn't be fixed with an apology or a few tears. The truth had been revealed, and now there was no going back. Whatever happened from here on out, I had done what I had to do. Part 7, the wedding day, forced to keep it together. The following days were absolute chaos. The fallout from the rehearsal dinner was way worse than I ever expected. After what happened, I thought maybe things would settle down by the wedding day, but they didn't. In fact, it felt like the whole world had turned upside down. The first phone call I got was from David's wife. She had heard what went down at the rehearsal dinner, and she was beyond furious. I honestly wasn't sure if I should have picked up, but I did. The moment I said hello, she started screaming. "How dare you?" she yelled. "How dare you ruin my life like this? I'm just trying to keep my family together, and you go and expose everything. What the hell is wrong with you?" I could hear the pain in her voice, but at the same time, I was so angry that I didn't feel bad for her. "I didn't ruin anything," I shot back. "Your husband did that all on his own. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth." She paused for a long moment before replying, quieter this time. I know, but this isn't what I wanted. This isn't how I wanted to find out. You have no idea what I've been through." I didn't know what to say. Honestly, I felt bad for her in some way. She didn't deserve this, but it was too late to change anything. "I'm sorry," I said, though I didn't really know if I meant it, but it had to come out. After that call, I started getting messages from other family members. Some were upset with me for airing the dirty laundry in such a public way, but most were on my side, saying they were proud I had finally exposed the truth. It felt like everyone was talking about it, and I couldn't escape the constant reminders of what happened. My sister tried to reach out to me a couple of times, but I couldn't bring myself to talk to her. I didn't even know what to say. She had betrayed me in a way I didn't think was possible. I didn't want to hear her excuses, didn't want to listen to her apologize again. I was done. I was supposed to be getting married in just a couple of days, and all I could think about was the mess my sister had made of everything. My excitement for the wedding had completely disappeared, replaced with this heavy feeling of dread. I didn't know if I could go through with it knowing that my sister, my maid of honor, had done something so horrible. The wedding day finally arrived, and it was like a scene out of a bad movie. I was standing in front of the mirror, looking at myself in my dress, and I felt like I was about to be crushed by the weight of everything that had happened. There was a knot in my stomach, and every time I thought about my sister being by my side, I couldn't shake the anger and betrayal. And then, there she was. My sister walked into the room, her face puffy from crying. She looked awful, and for a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know how to fix this, but I'll do anything to make it right. Please don't let this ruin your day. You deserve to be happy." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to scream at her, tell her that there was no way to fix what she had done. But another part of me, the part that had once been close to her, wanted to believe her, wanted to forgive her and move on. I just stared at her for a moment, taking in what she'd said, and then I sighed. "You've already ruined enough, you know? I don't think I can forgive you for what you did." The room fell silent. She looked like she was going to cry again, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I couldn't be the one to make her feel better after everything she had done to me. She had made her choices, and now I had to make mine. Part 8. My sister's last attempt at reconciliation. The tension in the room was unbearable. My sister stood there, her face a mess of regret and tears, while I tried to keep it together. Every part of me wanted to just let go, to cry or scream, or even tell her that I still loved her, but I couldn't. Not after what she'd done. She had destroyed the trust we had built over years of sisterhood. I kept replaying everything in my head, the way she'd acted like nothing was wrong, how she pretended to be my biggest supporter while hiding this massive betrayal. It felt like a gut punch, and no amount of apology was going to fix it. "I'm so sorry," she said again, this time her voice cracking. "Please don't let this ruin your wedding day." I looked at her, trying to process everything. She wasn't the same person I had grown up with, the sister I had always looked up to. This new version of her felt foreign, someone I didn't recognize. And as much as I hated to admit it, I knew that nothing would be the same between us again. I walked over to the window, looking out at the garden where the ceremony was supposed to take place. I could hear the bustle of people getting ready, the sound of guests arriving. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but right now, it felt like I was just going through the motions. "Can you just go?" I said quietly without turning around. "Please, I don't want to deal with this right now." My sister didn't argue. She didn't say another word, just left the room, her footsteps heavy as she walked away. I stood there for what felt like forever, alone with my thoughts. The weight of what was happening sank in deeper. My wedding day, the one thing I'd looked forward to for so long, was now tainted by the drama and betrayal my sister had brought into my life. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. Should I just cancel everything? Call off the wedding? But then I thought about my fiancé, about all the planning, the work we had put into making this day special. I couldn't back out now. But I also knew that the person I had once been wasn't the same anymore, and that was partly because of my sister. The minutes dragged on, and as I took deep breaths to calm myself, I realized I couldn't let this ruin the whole day. It wasn't just about me anymore. This was my wedding day, and I had worked too hard for it. I had to take control of the situation, not let it control me. When I finally walked down the aisle later that afternoon, I still felt a knot in my stomach, but I kept my head high. My sister was nowhere to be found, and while part of me felt relief at that, another part of me was deeply saddened by her absence. The maid of honor should have been standing beside me, smiling and holding my bouquet, but she wasn't. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that this hole in my day would never be filled. Part 9. The wedding night, torn between forgiveness and anger. The ceremony itself was a blur. I remember walking down the aisle, the eyes of our friends and family on me, but honestly, my mind wasn't fully there. My sister's betrayal still lingered in the air like an unwelcome cloud, and no matter how hard I tried to push it out of my head, it was always there, hovering just beneath the surface. I smiled and nodded, exchanging vows with my fiancé, but in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about the mess my sister had made. She should have been standing beside me. She should have been celebrating with me. But instead, she was somewhere, hiding, probably drowning in her shame and regret. But I wasn't the only one affected by her actions. David's wife was conspicuously absent from the wedding, and I knew it was because of what had happened at the rehearsal. I couldn't blame her for staying away. If I were in her shoes, I would have done the same. The whole day felt like a strange mix of joy and sorrow. The people I loved were there, celebrating with me. But in the back of my mind, the question of my sister's future loomed large. What would happen now? Could we ever go back to being close? Or had she ruined everything beyond repair? After the ceremony, the reception was no better. The guests were celebrating, dancing, and drinking, but I felt like an outsider in my own wedding. My sister wasn't there, obviously, and I couldn't help but feel her absence. There was a void, something I couldn't ignore, and it gnawed at me as the evening wore on. Then, about halfway through the reception, I got a message. It was from my sister. My heart skipped a beat as I read it. "I'm so sorry. I know I've ruined everything, but I want to talk. Please let me make this right. I'll do anything." I didn't know what to feel. I had made my peace with the fact that she wasn't there, but now she was reaching out, trying to repair what she had broken. Part of me wanted to just block her out, to cut all ties and move on. But another part of me wondered if there was any hope for reconciliation. Could we ever go back to how we were before? Could I ever forgive her? I decided not to respond right away. Instead, I put the phone down and took a deep breath, trying to focus on the rest of the night. I didn't want to let her drama overshadow everything I had worked so hard for. But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that things would never be the same. At some point, my fiancé noticed I was a little off. He pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay. I told him I was fine, that it was just wedding stress. But in truth, I didn't know how to explain what was really going on in my mind. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and felt like I was carrying the weight of my sister's betrayal on my shoulders. Part 10. The final conversation. Is there any hope for us? By the time the reception started winding down, I was emotionally exhausted. I had tried to enjoy the night, tried to make the most of the celebration. But all I could think about was my sister and the mess she had created. I could feel her presence hanging in the air like a bad omen. And no matter how much I wanted to escape that feeling, it wouldn't go away. As I sat at the head table, trying to focus on my new husband, I kept replaying everything that had happened. The wedding, the rehearsal dinner, the confrontation. I could hardly believe it had all gone down the way it had. It felt surreal. This wasn't how I had envisioned my wedding day. And now, I wasn't sure how I was supposed to move forward. My fiancé noticed I wasn't my usual self, so he leaned over and squeezed my hand. "Hey, I know it's been a lot today. You okay?" I smiled weakly at him. "Yeah, I'm fine, just a lot going on." He gave me a reassuring smile, his eyes full of understanding. "You know I'm here for you, right? If you need to talk or if you just need some space, we'll figure it out together." I nodded. That was the thing. I wasn't alone anymore. I had him, and I knew I could lean on him. And as the night went on, I realized that even though my sister had shattered something inside me, I still had people who cared about me, who supported me. That was something I hadn't considered enough in the chaos of the last few days. But just as I was starting to calm down, my phone buzzed again. Another message from my sister. "I know you don't want to hear from me right now, but please just listen. I'm at the hotel. Please, can we talk?" I stared at the message, feeling conflicted. On one hand, I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of thinking everything would be okay just because she showed up and begged for forgiveness. On the other hand, I wanted closure. I wanted to hear her out, to understand what had led her to make the choices she did. Was there a possibility for us to rebuild what she had destroyed? I debated with myself for a long time before deciding that I needed to face it. It wasn't about forgiving her in that moment. It was about understanding where we stood. I wasn't going to let her ruin the rest of my life, but I owed it to myself to hear her out. "Okay," I typed back. "I'll meet you in the lobby. But this doesn't change everything. We need to talk." I could feel the tension leaving me slightly, but there was still a knot in my stomach as I got up from the table. My fiancé watched me leave, his expression a mix of concern and understanding. I gave him a small nod, assuring him that I wasn't making any rash decisions. This conversation wouldn't change everything immediately, but it would give me some clarity on where we stood. When I entered the hotel lobby, I saw my sister sitting near the corner, her shoulders slumped. She looked so different from the confident woman I had once known. Now, she seemed broken. Her eyes were red from crying, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. She stood up when she saw me, her expression full of apology and regret. I know I've messed everything up, she said, her voice shaky. And I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I need you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. I don't even know why I did it. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. I don't understand, though. You've hurt so many people, not just me. You had to know that what you were doing wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I get that now, and I hate myself for it. I was just so lost. I didn't know what I was doing, but I realize now that I hurt you more than anyone else. I took advantage of the trust you had in me, and I'll regret that forever. The conversation went on for a while, with her apologizing over and over again, explaining how lost she had felt, how confused she was about everything. I listened, but part of me couldn't help but feel like it was too late. She couldn't undo the damage she had done. She couldn't take back what she had stolen from me, my trust, my sense of security in our relationship. But hearing her speak, seeing how truly sorry she was, gave me a small sense of peace. I didn't know what the future held for us, but at least I could walk away knowing she understood the gravity of her actions. Wow, that was one roller coaster of a story, huh? Betrayal, heartbreak, and a lot of emotional turmoil. If you've ever been through something similar, I want to hear from you. How did you handle situations where trust was broken by someone close to you? Did you ever forgive them, or did you move on without looking back? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have a conversation. Because, trust me, I know this kind of drama can leave you with so many mixed feelings. And if you found this story relatable or just wild to watch unfold, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you never miss another story like this. Thanks for sticking around until the end, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay strong, folks.